Dignity Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on hmTv. I'm Bernie Furshpan, host of Raised by Survivors at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. And today I have a very special guest with me who is also, like myself, second-generation Holocaust survivor. And she's got quite a story to tell. She was a principal locally here on Long Island and continues to educate about the horrors of the Holocaust, but to inspire young people to do better. Thank you so much for joining me, Sandy Pensak.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm thrilled that you agreed to join me today and tell me your story of being raised by, is it both your parents that were survivors? Where did they meet?
My parents met after the war. I do know that my dad was in several forced labor camps. They were sub-camps of Gross Rosen, some of them. Bunzlau, Langenbiele, Reichenbach, Wiesau. I mean, the list went on and on. My mom was in two, Neustadt and Grimberg. And so it wasn't until much later on that the stories and what they had gone through became more understood by me and spoken about, probably more so when I had my own children and my daughter, my oldest child, was involved in a project. And then from there, it's, Spielberg, Shoah Foundation. So I guess like most 2Gs in the early years of growing up with our parents, it was not something that we spoke about.
Right.
And yet we all knew by the small families that we had and the small circle of friends who were survivors like them, we all knew that our background, our history, our experiences were different than our friends whose parents did not go through what our parents went through.
It's so true. It's so true. And it took them about 40 years after the end of the war to start opening up because of some of the films that came out and made them realize if they don't tell their stories, nobody's going to know about them. And it's so important. Now, your father, you said he somehow managed to survive forced labor camps. And I did not know until just a few years ago that there were 44,000 of these camps. That's why I didn't recognize the names of the camps that you mentioned, because there's so many of them.
Right.
And it's just incredible that he made it out alive, because most people couldn't tolerate the conditions, the harsh conditions, not only of the weather and diseases being spread and the lack of food, but the physical labor that was involved.
Right.
How far back do you remember when you were young, when you first found out that your parents endured, the Holocaust? When I was young, I remember them watching the old films, of the Holocaust, and they would sit there and sob. And I knew there was some kind of a connection that they had. When did you find out? When did they first start telling you, or did you realize yourself?
I remember my mom used to wake up and in the middle of the night, and I do remember her having, I guess, nightmares. I remember her screaming sometimes. My father, my parents owned a luncheonette, candy store luncheonette. So
where was that?
That was right near St. John's University.
In Queens?
In Queens, on Union Turnpike.
Sure.
And I think that maybe the beginning was when some less than kind kids in class would ask why my parents spoke the way they spoke. And yet I was very proud of my parents because they spoke English, I thought, well. They read English, they wrote in English, and considering they only went to night school for 3 months because they were raising my brother and me, and they were, trading, night school times. My father would come home from work, and so my mother could go to night school, and that was when we were living in Brooklyn. But I would say I knew my parents had this small circle of people. They were part of a fraternal order that was all the people from their region in Poland. It's called the Fraternal Order of Benjamin Sosnowiec. So it takes in all of the towns in that Zagłębie region of Poland. So I knew they had that certain commonality of experience, but I went to Hebrew school. It was touched on very peripherally, not with the detail that we have today. I would say it really opened up when my daughter was in 8th grade and they were doing a project together, and she needed to interview a survivor, and she wanted to interview my mom. And so that was 1992, 93. And that was the first time that my mother, we had little snippets here and there, but never, because she had a list of questions as an 8th grader. And I remember my husband we were in my parents' home with the Super 8 camera, and he was rolling it. We must have had to stop the interview a dozen times because she just broke down. And it was really the first time that she had to speak about it, and she had to speak about it to my daughter. Really? And in front of all of us, and I could see I'm welling up.
Oh, yes.
It was very difficult to open that up. So that was that. And then shortly after, then the Spielberg Foundation. So I'm going to say that it was probably about 95 or 96 when they came to the house and they interviewed my father, who was willing to talk for 2 hours. My mother said, "No, I don't want to talk about it anymore."
Do you still have that original?
We have
film?
And in fact, we went to the we have the video, and you can get it through the Holocaust Museum in Washington. It's there, and
very good.
And we've seen it. We actually sat there.
So important
and
to hear these stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's important for young people to hear the stories.
Yeah.
And to learn the lessons so that we don't keep repeating it. Unfortunately, we're still repeating some of these things. I have a couple of other questions for you. Now, both your parents were Polish, just like my parents, and I grew up, I was raised on kishka and chav and picha and krepelach and chopped liver and stuffed cabbage and
gefilte fish.
Gefilte fish. Oh, yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
Kielbasa.
Yeah. My dad used to love this.
Yeah.
My mom used to make this food for my dad because she raised him, not only me and my brother, because he lost his entire family. His 4-year-old brother, his parents, his sister. I was raised on this food. Were you raised on this? Now, they owned a luncheonette. Did they introduce some of these things?
So this is very interesting. I don't even know how my mother learned how to cook the way she did, but I think that when they had the store at one point, they had to hire a professional cook. My mother had to be out for a medical reason, and so they brought in this cook, Al, and then when she came back, she was on her feet again. She watched him, she learned from him, but I think she just had an innate ability, and yes, she cooked everything. She cooked... So, like in the store, when it was St. Patty's Day, she made corned beef and cabbage. But she made, my father loved liver and onions, so she made that. Of course, for all the Jewish holidays, she made everything from scratch. She had 2 very dear friends, Abe and Leo Lullack, that loved her picha. And they married American women who didn't know from picha, so my mother always made it, and they would love to eat that. I wouldn't eat it.
I wouldn't eat it too.
But yeah, I mean, my father, I think that's part of their soup was a big thing in the house. All kinds of soup, barley, mushroom, chicken soup, matzo balls, krepla, everything, stuffed cabbage, all the things you named. It's part of the Jewish Polish Jewish cuisine.
Now, my brother and I, we both became doctors, specialists in different fields. You became a principal of an elementary school. You're also an adjunct lecturer at Queens College.
Well, I'm on hiatus from that now, but
but you've done a lot of great things like that. But did you feel any pressure from your parents to succeed? Because a lot of Holocaust survivors pressured their kids to some degree to do well. Would you agree with that? And did you feel some of that pressure?
I didn't feel pressure to bring home A's. I was a good student. I was a very good student. And I felt that my mother's mantra was always education is its best reward, and that how lucky to have the ability to have an education, because as you know, their educations were disrupted. My mother was born in 1925, so you can imagine the war broke out in 39. So how far did they get in their education? I didn't feel the pressure to bring home the great grades, but I felt the message was that an education is something that is so valuable. I also know that my mom had great respect for two professions, the medical profession and the teaching profession. And I always felt that she wanted me to go into teaching because of various reasons. One was the security of the job, but in the luncheonette that they had, teachers came into the store. I remember one of the customers was Chancellor Irving Anker.
Oh, yeah,
from
sure,
the New York
him.
City
Yes.
Board of Education, it was called. And these were people that my parents welcomed into the store and willingly, cared for them, served them. And I think my mother just had the highest regard for people who went into that field, that you had to be an educator. You had to yourself become educated.
It commanded respect.
Yes.
And there was a career where you can earn a nice living and succeed in life and raise a family with that.
And I think that was something my mother communicated to me. But the other part of what you said was, I think that two G's from what you mentioned, we know what our parents went through as we got older, and even when we were younger, we didn't really know it. But I think there was an innate understanding that we have to be good. We have to be good. We cannot be problems for them. And I think they also led their lives by example. I watched my parents in the store. I saw the way they treated people with kindness. I saw the level of excellence that my parents ran that store. It was pristine, clean. With my father, if I had to scrub the grill or sweep the floor, it was never good enough. He'd go over it. You missed here, you missed there. So, when you live that, it's communicating to you, you got to do better, you got to do better. Even though I didn't feel it necessarily as pressure, but I think it's like children learn what they live.
Correct.
And so, but you see it, and I saw it every day. For the first 6 years, I grew up in the back of the store where there was a little apartment that was attached to the store. So we'd sleep in there at night. There was just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a bathroom. I'd come up out in the morning. My mother would brush my hair in a corner of the store, nowhere near food. She couldn't leave the business. It was just such a part of our lives growing up, and you just saw the way they interacted with the public. Right. And I think that helped me a lot in going out in my career.
I was asked if there was one word that would describe your upbringing with your parents, what is it? And my answer came up right away, and that was loved. I felt loved, and they appreciated every Holocaust survivors really understood what life was all about. You have to go through a lot of adversity and appreciate the simple things, the little things. Even toilet paper. My father appreciated even toilet paper because he didn't have any for 3 years in the forest. And so they appreciated the simple things. They loved their clientele. They loved their family, their friends, their tools. Whatever it was that they owned, they appreciated every simple thing. And that's one of the lessons, is that, first of all, things can be taken away from you like that. Neighbors can turn on you like that. And that's what happened to them. And so they were grateful to be alive and appreciated their clientele, especially my dad. He really loved his clients. They loved him. He even worked for John Lennon of the Beatles. Wow. He did plaster and tile work for him. Incredible stuff.
So that's what my father did when he first came
Oh,
here.
maybe they knew each other, quite honestly, because your story sounds like my story.
He laid tiles.
So did my dad.
Yeah, well, and I do remember that when I know he did that kind of work in the camp, because I remember when I took him to see the movie, the Wiesenthal movie.
Sure.
I Will Never Forget You, and they went down into the quarry in Mauthausen.
Mm-hmm.
The minute that scene came on, my father, I had never seen this, and this is 10 years, no, more than 10 years ago, about 2007. 2007, and this is 2026, so it's almost 20 years ago. My father broke down in the movie theater. Wow. I had never seen him, and it was reminiscent of him working in the quarry.
Of course. I was also asked if I ever saw my father cry, and I did see him cry. First of all, he did also wake up in the middle of the night with his nightmares. He was horrified and burdened with a lot of guilt. But he did cry when my brother and I graduated high school and college and got married, because our success was his success. This was the fruit of his labor. Because he survived the hell that he went through, he was grateful to see us succeed on his behalf and the behalf of his entire family. And so we both experienced similar things. We grew up on the same food, the same culture, the same Yiddishkeit. And as an educator, you've learned a lot and you've taught a lot about the Holocaust. You shared with me a couple of interesting things that, maybe I knew in the back of my mind, but it's hard to believe that people can do this to other people. As an example, there was an establishment of something called a Sonderbauten, which were special buildings. These were brothels.
Right.
That were built by the order of Heinrich Himmler to incentivize and to reward guards and military personnel by having these brothels
and
available.
some of the prisoners and some of the male prisoners.
Is that right?
Yes, to incentivize them to work harder.
I see.
Right.
And of course, these were Jewish.
No.
They were not Jewish.
No, although I've been reading, and I think it's going to be coming out more, because you don't have women that want to talk about it. And certainly where we are in history now, survivors are not, there's so few of them.
Right.
But most of the women that were taken were Polish or German, not Jewish, that were taken. And it was their way of survival. They got better conditions, right? That's why some of them were willing. It was, who's to say what you would do when your life is on the line?
We don't know.
We don't know. No. So that's why I wouldn't judge, I don't
nobody's judging anybody.
But those women that were taken, because, the laws were that you could not have relations with a Jewish woman, even though we know for those brothels, Jewish women were not taken. Could there have been, who will ever know, whether a Jewish, beautiful-looking woman, I don't know that.
Was included.
Yeah, we don't know, but we do know that the Jewish women were raped. We know that.
They were, yes, of course.
Yeah.
It existed in Mauthausen.
Yes.
In Gusen, Auschwitz.
Ravensbrück,
Buchenwald, Dachau, right. Flossenburg. I can't even pronounce some of these names, but quite a few.
And I know the story, when my daughter was asking my mother at one point in the interview broke down and said, though I wasn't personally violated, because she was talking about they had been on the death march, she and a few, and she talked about a few friends. They broke off the death march. They were hiding in a barn. And then when they were finally liberated by the Russians, and she said, though I wasn't personally violated, and she mentioned that her friends, the Russians, were, as my mother said it, they had been on the front for so long, and men will be men, and they did what they had to do at the time, and that it, and I always felt when she said it, was she trying to spare us by saying that, don't worry, it didn't happen to me, or that it could have happened to her. I never came to like closure with that. And I know when she died, when my mom died and we were sitting Shiva, one of those friends came to pay a Shiva call and asked me if I would tell her daughter what happened, because she knew that I knew. And I couldn't do it. And I haven't done it.
It's hard.
It's too hard.
It's hard. It's a lot of suffering created by people onto other people here on this tiny little planet that we all share. We can certainly do better. And that's what you're trying to do, educate young people, that their generation, I'm going to give you the final word on this podcast because we're running out of time. Do you have hopes for young people and their generation? And a second part of that same question, do you believe that education is going to make a difference? Will it mitigate anti-Semitism and hate? Some people say it's been failing. I disagree with that. I think it is impactful. I think we're just not doing enough of it, and we're not accessing everybody all the time. So what are your thoughts about that and the children?
I have to continue to have hope in education and making people aware and being involved. And I think it's making the lessons of the Holocaust relatable in the times that we're living, so that we take these lessons, or the history that is the Holocaust, and see its relevance in today's world, in the hope that we can help people behave more kindly, with more tolerance, with more understanding, with more compassion. I think if you lose that, then what do you have?
And if you give up, it's true.
Yeah. If you lose that, then what are you going to aspire to? I think because of where we are in terms of artificial intelligence, technology, how much, the propaganda that was in the 1930s was limited. Now it's not so limited. It's around the world, and anybody can believe anything. So you want to counter that. I think because I'm involved in our fraternal order, it is one of the remaining Landsmannschaften here in New York. We are called the Fraternal Order of Bendin Sosnovitz. We have a few survivors that are still with us. We have the 2Gs and 3Gs who are on our board. And when we have our annual Yizkor at the cemetery for the Jewish holidays, we see not only survivors, 2G, 3G, but even 4Gs come out. So,
they're coming around.
The
young kids.
I think that it's hard work, that sometimes we get frustrated, but I try to say to our organization, I remember when I was the 3G's age, I was busy raising a family, I was busy in my career. I couldn't devote as much time to that. And my father always used to say, Sandy, come, do, and for them, it started as more of a social organization when they all came to this country, and they had lost their families. They got together. It was a burial society, yes, but it was also social for them. So the 2Gs and 3Gs don't need it as a social, but I do think our parents have done quite a good job of instilling in us the importance of continuing to educate and have people be aware of this history.
Sandy Pensak.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time, carving out the time today to talk to me, with me, about your parents, about your experience. I love talking about it. It makes me feel warm inside that I have fellow 2Gs to share these experiences with, and to remind us what wonderful parents we had.
Yeah.
We really
Exactly.
did. They really cared about us, and they cared about other people.
Yeah, the final thing I'll say is they were the lucky ones that they made it out.
Yes.
And we were the lucky ones that they were our parents.
Correct. Yeah, God bless them.
It's the best way to end this. Thank you.
God bless you. And I want to thank my listening audience today for joining me here on hmTV. I'm Bernie Furshpan, host of Raised by Survivors. Until next time.